Hello and welcome to Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, we got a very special guest for you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alex von Kurkendall to the podcast.
Hello, everyone. Yes, it's wonderful to be here with you fellas. Good evening, everyone.
Friend of the show, AVK, has finally made it onto the pod. We're very happy to have you here, Alex.
Very happy to be here, guys. It's been a little while we've been talking about this. I'm excited to join you all, especially this evening during a nice quarantine at home.
Yeah. The weather's beautiful outside. Perfect time to be inside.
The weather's beautiful inside.
My shit is temperature controlled.
But how's the temperature on your island though, boys?
I don't know. I imagine the temperature on my island is always a breezy 72 degrees.
I had a rainy day in Marquette.
Thanks for being here, Alex. You are here to talk about educational video games, sort of educational technology and where software and video games intersect. We're going to get into the history of that a little bit, Nintendo, what they've done, and just sort of all about that, right? So, thanks for coming on to talk about that.
Very exciting.
Very pumped.
And then we've got some shout outs. We've got a handful, so I want to go through these quickly. Kyle Jones, I talked about him on the podcast before, a friend of mine, coworker. He joined our Facebook group and made a nice post. Hopefully not too critical. But he gave a little feedback too.
It was great. It's good stuff to hear.
Kyle picked up a Switch Lite, and he told me he needed to join the Facebook group finally. So, quick shout out to Robert Segovia. He's going to let us know what we got wrong with our 3D Mario rankings at some point. We hope to have him on soon too. Tommy Green also responded to the podcast, said that Steam Gardens is a great song. We talked about that song a lot last week. And then Daniel Murphy also liked Steam Gardens. He put up a poll about whether Steam Gardens or Gusty Gardens is the better song. What's the consensus?
I mean, I voted for Gusty, but I think the consensus seemed to be Steam.
Yeah.
Steam Gardens is the banger and the bop that we all love.
I mean, it's great. It's got a fun little riff, but I mean, man, it's like a John Williams score, that Gusty Gardens.
And then also, who I can only assume is a Daniel Murphy, D Murphy 007 gave us an Apple Podcasts review. Thanks for that. If that was
That's
you.
his dad, David Murphy. Yeah. His dad, Daniel's dad, is a big fan of the pod.
That's David Murphy Bond.
right. And then AVK, did you have some shout outs you wanted to share?
I had a couple quick shout outs, just really quick to my good friends Ed and Kate Chalupa here. There's some 214 Switch Heads. They came to my island today in Animal Crossing, left me some gifts, and we ran around and we went back to Kate's island and did some exploring as well. Got some great inspiration for some designs, both exterior and interior. So thanks for that, Ed and Kate Chalupa. Appreciate y'all. Much love.
Oh yeah. That's the best part of visiting other people's islands. It's like I always leave with ideas of what to do with my island.
Well, so if you too want to be mentioned on the podcast, leave us a note. We also appreciate it if you share the podcast with your friends or random strangers as well. And with that, we'll get into the news.
Join our street team.
Oh, yeah. Put up posters.
Start a zine.
Wait, hold on. Before we move on from that, we should totally make a Switch Headz zine. I think that would be the best way to disseminate information in lockdown.
Well,
of course,
yeah.
Zines really work.
So this is sort of a personal anecdote, but it's been true. The Switch is sold out, y'all. If you want to buy a Nintendo Switch right now, good luck. I've been reading that they're trying to shift production to Vietnam, but it's not really keeping up. I have decided that I want to buy a second Switch or a Switch Lite, and I've been trying really hard. I actually have 2 Switch Lites on order right now, and I'm trying to see which one actually goes through.
It's like 2017 all over again.
It is. It's nuts out there. There's like every day I check, and there's like an article by somebody in the gaming world that's like, these are the 2 places you can get Switches right now. And then I go there and they're gone.
Yeah.
So
that happened today when I tried to buy that discounted Labo. It was like, I like clicked it. I clicked it once and it was available. And then I walked away for a second, came back and it was gone.
Yeah. Any in demand or discounted video game thing right now is hard to find. Mm-hmm. And then this was kind of funny. Nintendo tweeted about Splatoon 2, like an update, and then they deleted the tweet immediately.
I saw that. Yeah.
Everybody's like, what does that mean? It's probably nothing. Maybe just a weapons update, because they said they're not updating the game anymore, but it does make you wonder.
Nintendo is so weirdly cryptic about Splatoon 2. They like constantly are posting like really mysterious shit. I don't understand.
That's true.
I'm into it. It gets the fan base talking, but yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
It gets everyone really hyped for what ends up being like minor adjustments to like a couple weapons.
Right.
But hey, you get on and you play a couple rounds with your friends and it's a good time. So
that's probably
it's just
what it
to
is.
remind us it exists. Yeah.
I know a couple of y'all were interested in this, I think. Burnout Paradise Remastered. It sounds like maybe that's coming in June off to the Switch. I think it was like the Polish website for EA or like had this information. Also, unfortunately, had the price at $50, which is a lot for an older game.
Absolutely absurd. You can buy this game for like $10 on every other platform, like regularly. It's very frustrating. And this is just going to be more excuse for EA to be like, see, nothing sells on the Switch. And it's like, dude, I don't know.
Screw EA. Hey. Hot take. Okay.
No, it's not that hot of a take.
That's true. David, you might like this one. One of the Rhythm Heaven co-creators, I think the musician, is that correct? I
believe so, yeah.
They like sent out a tweet about like what would you want about how much they want a Rhythm Heaven game for the Switch, and like asking people what they would want. I think trying to drum up interest in the in the series. There was some sort of information I'd seen that maybe the series was dead. So maybe they're trying to get fans to demand it because that seems to work these days.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's the same like EAD development staff that does the WarioWare games as well, makes these. So like, you know, maybe if the rumors are true and there is a WarioWare game coming, they're trying to gauge like what their next project is going to be. I mean, I love Rhythm Heaven. I think all the Rhythm Heaven games like are just as fun as WarioWare to me, and they're all rhythm focused. And I love rhythm games and like music games. So I'm very, very hopeful that they do make a new game, but yeah, I don't want to have to beg for it. You know what I mean? Yeah,
this is like a new trend.
Don't want to say it, but got to stir the pot. What about as a rhythm game? It might be a new direction and a new opportunity to make WaluigiWare a real possibility.
Yeah,
that's true. I would probably forego a Rhythm Heaven game to give Waluigi his own game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally.
Much deserved.
Some sad news. Rick May, who was a voice actor in many video games, but as you may know him best as a Pepe Hair, call back there for y'all.
Yeah.
From Star Fox, passed away due to the coronavirus or COVID. Actually, it sounds like
very unfortunate. Yeah, he played Pepe Hair, and then he also played Andros and in the Star Fox games, and played the soldier in Team Fortress 2. So he had a long storied career, not just in video games. He was like a director and an actor, and he'd been in lots of stage and screen productions as well. So very, very sad to hear.
He gave us classics like Do a Barrel Roll.
That's
Do
right.
a Barrel Roll.
That is one of the earliest memes.
Yeah. That was like a You're the Man Now dog. You guys remember those? Yeah.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah. Definitely rest in peace, Rick May. It was really cool to see the internet kind of come together to remember this guy. Because voice actors so often go unnoticed. So it was nice to see him get some recognition at the end of his life here.
And this is kind of a big one. We got a Switch update, like a update to the Switch firmware. We're on 10.0.0 now. And there were some big things here. Arguably, I think a couple of the big ones, button mapping. So you can now actually change create different profiles and have different button mapping, which is a big accessibility issue, or solves that rather.
Yeah, that's huge for accessibility, especially since you can map the Joy-Cons as well, the buttons on the Joy-Cons, including the S, L, and SR buttons on the side. So people who don't have an arm, like maybe only have one arm, or have other ailments that may not make it easy to hold a controller with both hands. Now the Switch is like a very, very good system for people like that. And then in addition to that, like there are just so many practical reasons that I think we'll find over the next couple months to be button mapping, and having it on a system level is so smart. I don't know if anybody else has done that.
That's true. It seems like you can do it in games, but I don't know about a system level.
I think like Steam has like overall button remapping for everything. Like they're really good at that kind of stuff. But like,
yeah, you can do it on an Xbox.
You can. Okay,
Nice.
that's good. That's good. But
Should be.
either way, it's great. It's like it's going to make running and jumping in Breath of the Wild a lot easier. I think like
Maybe those NES games.
the NES games is like the first thing I thought of.
Absolutely.
Because I hate like having a weird claw grip when I'm playing NES. I just want my hands to sit normally, you know.
I hear that,
So
brother.
that's amazing.
And then another big one is you can now transfer software data between your SD card and the system memory, which, it's really weird how, like, depending on when you download a game, where it'll go and that kind of stuff, you can't really control it. So now you finally can. Like, I've had parts of updates in multiple places, like, and you're like, what is going on?
David,
so
I
that's
think you
nice.
and I had the same problem with 2K20 or 2K19.
Oh yeah, it's like 32 gigs.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like there are some games like Fortnite, for instance, like whenever you would fall into, I haven't played Fortnite in a while, so I forget what they're called, but like Tilted Towers or whatever, like whenever you would fall into there, if the game was on your SD card, the textures wouldn't load in. So like some games just run better when it's on internal memory. So it's nice to be able to kind of move stuff around as you need it now.
That's true.
Whenever I wanted to do that before, I had to like delete stuff off my internal, take out my SD card, then download it. This is way better.
I'm actually very hyped for this. It's very convenient.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I thought this wasn't that big of a deal, but I was, I don't want to say shouted down. That's wrong. I was informed that people are excited about a bookmark feature for news items.
No one shouted you down.
That's why I know. That's why I said I don't want to say shouted down.
It was me.
Matt was like, shut the fuck up for once in your life,
No one
Patrick.
wants fucking bookmarks. Everyone fucking loves them.
I just didn't.
Bookmarks have been around since books.
I don't use the news feature on the Switch very much.
It's lit, fam. I'm on that news channel. I knew about the Splatoon updates before y'all. Just saying.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, like in regards to Splatoon, like something that Nintendo did that was like really weird before, is like they will release like certain outfits or whatever in the news channel for Splatoon. So like you could go to the news channel and then it would like open up the game and then you would have whatever you got from that specific news update. So like if you're playing another game and you see it, you don't want to forget about it. Now you can bookmark it for later. I think they
That's
did that
true.
with some Breath of the Wild stuff as well.
They did with ARMS as well. They would have
And ARMS.
things you could get through that.
So maybe we'll be seeing more of that because of this.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
And then there's a few other things, like they moved some stuff around and they you can get some Animal Crossing icons and of course stability.
Did they ever do anything with that update they did a few months ago with like the play invites or like the like alarm that was like built in?
The alarm is used in Ring Fit and the play invites are used by Divinity Original Sin too, and that's about it as far as I know.
Damn.
Yeah.
We all thought that was going to be like the next big thing.
I know, and it sure could be.
Please,
Here we
Nintendo, please help us. We just want to play with our friends.
Yeah. And then a fellow named Mike Heskin, who I've not followed before, but apparently they're kind of like reverse engineer person. They tweeted out that there appears to be some support in this update for a new Switch hardware model.
Matt, what do you think about this?
This is pretty cool.
This means this is definitive proof there's a Switch Pro, right?
Yeah, this is definitive proof. But I think Patrick, I don't want to interrupt what you're saying.
No, you're not interrupting. This is what I wanted to throw
the
it to you.
coolest thing is that you asked me my opinion, and boy, am I going to give it to you. There's his tweet, Mike, says there's evidence of a secondary display.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think we're going to get a second display on a new Switch model, but I think that's probably maybe a display driver that allows you to have multiple, like one person can play on the Switch and also with better hardware cast that same either screen or an entirely different player could play on the television.
Yeah.
So it'd be like some kind of system where there's a screen in your hand and a screen on the TV. No, that sounds like pretty advanced technology.
Ooh, child.
Wait, hold on. What if there's a hole on top where you can put one of those plastic pen styluses?
Oh, you guys.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Wii U.
We're coming full circle to the Wii U.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, they could port the last remaining Wii U game, which is Nintendo Land, if that is a thing. It's hard for me to visualize, really, what they're going to do. And it's pretty nebulous, obviously.
Do you guys think this is a second display or something else?
I don't know.
Do
I don't see how that would work.
I can see video out, like you guys were talking about, having more connectivity features just for multiplayer especially. That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be pretty cool. But obviously very early days right now of whatever this is. And it might not be anything. But I mean, I think the same guy found in previous updates in the data files talking about 2 upcoming revisions, which did come out last year with the V2 and the Switch Lite. So there is credence to it. It's just what it means we don't really know at this time.
Yeah. And then talking about updates, the Bunny Day update is over for Animal Crossing. And a lot of people are happy about that. Cherry blossoms are also gone in Animal Crossing.
That's sadder.
That is sad.
Did y'all get the wand? The Bunny Day wand?
Yeah.
I got the recipe, but I haven't made it. But I did make a second tipper. So if I have like an excess of stars at some point, I can make it. But
I like that the bunny wand just looks like a baby rattle.
It does.
A little bit too infantilized for me.
There's a whole lot of Animal Crossing stuff. We'll go through this. There is a real museum that has been using the museum in Animal Crossing to give like tours online.
That is fantastic. I saw that in the notes. I love this.
It's Monterey Bay Aquarium in Monterey, California.
I watched a little bit of the stream. I was working and I was doing like sound specific stuff, so I couldn't really tune in for very long. But like what I saw was awesome, and they basically were going through the fossils by the time I got in there, and they were just like, it was basically like whatever Blathers does whenever he assesses your fossils and like takes the donation, but they just went into like way more depth, and they were also like really amazed at like the layout of the museum in the game and the like kind of branching pathways of like the like genealogical kind of evolutionary lines. Said they were like all like very realistic and factual, and yeah, it was really interesting to watch. I got to watch the whole VOD sometime.
I mean, this is really cool. I think for multiple reasons, but one reason is like, everyone's trying to figure out creative outlets on while we're all stuck at home. Like people try to do improv shows through Zoom, but sometimes they don't really work because you're trying to translate something that's only for a live audience onto like a virtual, and like it takes more work. But something like this is so cool because you're taking like a tour guide and that you would do in real world and just placing it into a game that already has that kind of museum environment. So like the translation works really cool, and you get to experience something that you're already doing in a new way.
Totally.
It's pretty remarkable.
It's great. And as much as we all love Blathers, he tends to be a little short-winded, Love some
That's
more
the one thing I
contextual-
would never say about Blathers, actually.
some more science and some more context goes a long way, David.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And then, unfortunately, Animal Crossing was banned in China. We talked about, I think it was last week maybe, where players have been using Animal Crossing to sort of stage online protests and put up images and that kind of stuff on their island. And obviously, China took note and banned the game and like took down the server that's hosting it in China.
Yeah, and not only that, they had people go around, they had like government workers going around to retail stores and removing them from the shelves.
It's a huge shame.
Yeah,
This is
full on
mind-blowing.
ban.
Completely blew my mind to realize all of this.
It's
Yeah.
like, how is Animal Crossing any different than the internet? Or so, it's like the communications on Animal Crossing are not great.
They ban tons and tons of sites on the internet.
It's true.
So it's like,
It's just another one.
And I've heard the argument of like, how could they ban something so cute? But they've also banned Winnie the Pooh in China. So, so it's like this, not unprecedented.
And in response, the Taiwanese premier, said that they would never ban a game of like collecting sticks or something like that.
Talking to animals.
And they obviously are pro-democracy there. So
this has got to be a pretty tough blow for Nintendo, honestly. Like, because, they've been working on this China deal for, years, and to finally have a launch there. And they've been putting a lot of weight into the advertising for the game in China and really trying to get it to take off there. And that was probably, I mean, not that Nintendo's hurting from sales of Animal Crossing, but it's like, I think they probably sunk quite a bit of money into this only to have it totally thrown back in their face. So I wonder if they're going to be more hesitant about game releases going forward in China.
Yeah.
It can't be
That's
good
fair.
for the relations there.
Or unfortunately, maybe about the online elements,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hope they don't kowtow to the Chinese government like a lot of other game companies have.
And then there was a fishing tournament in Animal Crossing recently, and then they tweeted out, Nintendo, on one of their many Twitter accounts for the game, about when the next fishing tournaments will be. There'll be the next one will be in July, then there's one in October, and another one in January of next year. So we have those to look forward to. Yeah, once a quarter seems like. And then Bloomberg did a really big article on Animal Crossing and about how it's sort of the big hit of the lockdown, I think, of any medium, and kind of went over a lot of stuff and talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of good quotes from people like somebody from Famitsu, and just pulling a lot of really great information together. And sort of interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, but nothing we haven't really talked about, other than they got some sort of developer that works for Nintendo to get a quote without their name about how one of the reasons games from Nintendo often are so great is because they are allowed to have as much time as they need to make the game great, which is good to hear.
Yeah.
And we know that kind of already, but it's nice.
That's
to
been the
hear.
Nintendo way since the Super Nintendo,
Yeah, that the sort of quote from Miyamoto that gets shared a lot about a delayed game is eventually good. Something like
Yes.
that. But a rushed
But a rushed
game
game is forever bad.
Yeah.
Doesn't really apply in a world of patches, but like it's still good to have a complete package upon ship.
Yeah.
It's a much more pious approach to the craft, I think, as well.
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
And then there was a report from VentureBeat about, we've talked about them before, they kind of track there's tracking of like ad spending here that they shared with us, and video game ad spending was on the rise in March, and Nintendo was the lion's share of it. They spent a ton of money on advertising, and in particular on Animal Crossing. They spent over $1 million in ads. Like the only company that spent over $1 million, but they spent like 14.6 million in March.
Wow.
I was going to say $1 million seems pretty low.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I guess it worked, or maybe they didn't need to do that with the timing of things. I don't know. But
Yeah. I mean, and the game advertises itself on Twitter,
yeah, right now it is for sure.
Honestly, I bought the game just because you guys were having so much fun with it. I don't think I've been reached by any of that $14 million marketing budget, Nintendo. So just saying. Super Switch Headz, they know what they're talking about.
And just a quick follow up to something we were kind of speculating about is like all the games getting delayed because of the pandemic. CD Projekt Red said that they're still intending to release Cyberpunk 2077 in September. We'll see, of course, but they said that they think they can do it.
Yeah, I think they said something about how there will be the DLC for the game will be announced before launch, like they did with The Witcher, and they seem like they're all pretty locked into those dates. I think I feel like CD Projekt Red, like if it came down to it, this is completely unfounded. This is just a gut feeling, but I feel like might like release the game digitally if they had to make the date.
That
you know
makes
what I mean?
sense.
They just strike me as that kind of developer and publisher. I mean, especially with their own digital platform that they have with good old games. And I think that's what GOG stands for, right?
Yeah, good old games.
Yeah. And so hopefully they make it regardless. I think it'd be a very empty year for gaming if Cyberpunk didn't come out.
So you're saying they do digital and they'd forego physical releases temporarily
if they had to. Yeah. It's like
or at
say
least
they
simultaneous.
I mean, the game's been done for a long time. They've just like been polishing this whole time. So there's no reason that it shouldn't release this year, barring a distribution issue.
And then Jeff Keighley, who's involved in the Video Game Awards and was involved with E3, but backed out, like we talked about several weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, announced that he's involved with the Steam Game Festival Summer Edition. Steam did this apparently around the time of GDC with a Spring Edition. Somehow I didn't see that happen. I don't know if y'all did. But in lieu of GDC, they kind of did this, and it looks like in lieu of E3, they're doing this. So now we have IGN and the Steam Game Festival kind of competing to do digital events.
I feel like the prettiest girl at the dance. I have so many options.
So we'll see what shakes out with that. If it's as good as E3 for announcements and so on.
Hey, I'm hyped for how hyped Jeff Keighley is about this. That's all I have to say.
That's fair.
He's an excited guy in general, it seems. I think
Right.
and he's good at hyping up excitement in others, so
Absolutely.
he should keep doing his thing.
So the ESRB is the organization that rates video games, and they introduced a new ratings for loot boxes for like randomized in-game purchases. So I think a while back, I don't remember when this was, they rate games as like T for teen or M for mature or what have you. But they added saying if a game has in-game purchases, like, DLC or little microtransactions, but now that they're going to tell you whether they're like randomized or not, like loot boxes essentially. So there's an extra little designation there. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing, I think.
I think so too.
It's a step in the right direction for sure. I think that they should raise the rating to like teen or M if there are loot boxes in games to keep stuff away. This is a step towards that, maybe. I'd love to just see them go away, but it's good to have more awareness, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think because the previous indication of just in-game purchases would apply whether there was like one meaty, worthwhile DLC or whether there were, these random things. So it's nice that there's this breakout at least instead of just that doesn't really tell you anything,
For sure.
And then I think that's there to protect children, and education is sort of our main topic. So I think we're going to end there.
Segway master.
We'll take a real quick break, and then we'll get into our main topic of educational video games. And we're back, and we are going to be talking about educational video games and sort of all that topics that surround that. I don't know about y'all, but when I was in elementary school, I used these. I don't know if they were Apple IIs or like old computers where we did Logo, where like which is like a programming thing. Like we would go to a computer room and like you make these turtles.
Was this in like the 50s or?
No, this was in the 80s. And like you kind of like program a turtle to move around on the screen and it would draw lines behind it. And so that's the first thing my mind goes to, is because that's what I did when I was a kid. But there's a lot of games that growing up, and I'm sure y'all have some too, that were arguably like educational video games. So they've been around for a while, these things. Like Oregon Trail's a big one. Did y'all play that at school?
Oh, yeah.
All the time. Yep.
Yeah, played Oregon Trail 2, and a lot of Oregon Trail 2, honestly. That one was great. But I mean, what, like Magic Mountain and like Math Blaster?
Blaster, yes.
Yeah,
Math Blaster.
yeah, that game was tight.
Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego was another big one I played a lot at school and as a kid.
I mean, these were the days where I would be like most excited to go to school, right? Is like whenever we could go to the computer lab and like play these games. My question is, how much did I actually learn from these games? You know what I mean? And how much is it just like information that I had from elsewhere? And this was a fun distraction at school. But we can talk about that later in the discussion, I guess.
Well, I think like, I don't know much about the Oregon Trail except for what I learned through that game.
I learned what dysentery was.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that's my main takeaway.
Vocabulary is always something that I've learned from video games. If there was ever a word, new word like dysentery, I would look it up or ask a teacher or someone. And that was always a great way to learn something with video games.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. I think we'll get to that specifically later, but yeah, there's so much you can learn from anything in life that opens you up to new ideas and new things you weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
And then I don't know a lot about this, but AVK, maybe you can talk to us about this. You've got some notes here about learning styles and sort of gamer types.
Yeah. So, you guys are probably familiar with the idea of there's, different types of learners. So you have like audio learners, visual learners, people who are better when they're reading or writing something, somebody who writes something down or takes notes to memorize it, something like that. Or also kinesthetic learners. So in a similar way, this guy, Charles Bartle, he did a little test of gamer psychology back in the 80s and 90s, and he decided that there were like 4 main types of video game players, and these people engage in video games for, specific reasons, and they're more receptive to certain styles of play. For instance, he categorized them into 4 different kind of archetypes. Explorers, people who like to explore; killers, people who are competitive; completionists, people who are, trying to check off all the boxes; and then social players who just like to play with their friends.
You sent us a link to this test, and I took it, and I came out as an explorer primarily.
Oh,
but not very. But all of my explorer, socializing, and killing are all pretty close. And then my achiever is what this test called it, or like you said, completionist is super low. But that totally tracks for me. Those are the 3 things I like in games. I don't really like trying to check all the boxes. What about y'all?
I also took it, and 73% explorer. And
yes.
So explorer, just for our listeners, explorers delight in having the game expose its internal machinations to them.
Yeah,
that
was a lovely quote from Charles's website there. I
read it straight from the website.
David, what type of gamer are you?
Well, I came in at about 73% socializer. That was my main one there.
My man.
Which is interesting because I owned a Wii U. And then I came in at a 47% killer. And then both Explorer and Achiever were 40%, which makes sense for me. I mean, it's like, only until recently have I really felt like the urge to explore in open world games. You know what I mean? A lot of what it took for me was Breath of the Wild. And I think a big part of that was the constant carrot dangling in front of you for new things in every part of the map. And then another part of it that tracks with Socializer was that just like everybody was playing Breath of the Wild at the same time and everybody was sharing all their experiences. And it made me want to like also do those experiences. So like that's kind of where I get a lot of that exploration bug like recently. But yeah, I think like especially recently with the Switch, with how social like our Switch Headz community is, like I've definitely found myself playing games more socially, if not playing multiplayer than just sharing experiences.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm an 87% explorer actually. So
Wow.
definitely
I'm in a room of fucking explorers.
I'm definitely an explorer because this past Sunday I watched probably a 2-hour Twitch breakdown of one map in Halo 5. And then me and my crew went to the map and practiced all of the movements and all of the geometry stuff that you can do to play with the mechanics of the game.
Right. So, Alex, do you think that having a knowledge of these 4 different types of video game players can help with crafting an educational experience through gamification, like for people? Like, is it good to know the kinds of players that are going to be playing your game if you're going to be creating an educational experience?
First of all, I just want to say that I am not an educator or a game developer.
No, this is good though. Yeah, what's your experience in this field then?
So my experience in this field is I've worked on a game that is being developed, a learning app actually. That's an indie project with some lovely friends in the Bay Area in San Francisco. But so I've done a little bit of work on story and working on some of the actual how some of the games work, as well as some sound design and music. So that's kind of my background, just so you guys know. And David, I think you mentioned you have a little bit of a background in some e-learning as well.
A little bit, yeah. I worked as an audio engineer as well on for an e-learning company that has since defunct. They were called Inspire Learning, and a lot of the stuff that we would do is we would do some K through 12 stuff that was kind of like the market that we were always trying to get into. But a lot of what we ended up doing was like when you're onboarding new freshmen for college, like with orientation stuff, like a lot of the stuff we would do is like, defensive drinking, I guess you could call it, alcohol awareness, like social issues and stuff like that. And then we would try to make them interactive in order to appease the kids basically. So they're not just like sitting through a lecture, you know what I mean? But again, I'm not an educator either, but I do find it fascinating. And especially like, I think like viewing these 4 archetypes would probably make it easier for you to like craft an experience.
I think in a similar way that, when teachers are able to identify what type of students they're dealing with, if you're, what type of learning style you have, it makes it a lot more apparent, the steps that you need to take to connect the dots for that individual. And if you're, talking about a video game or an e-learning experience, we're definitely trying to connect some dots and light some minds and get a kid, whether the goal is learning math or, maybe it's phonics or a vocabulary game, or maybe simply something as keyboarding. We're definitely trying to, if you can identify their play style, then you can identify what resonates with them. And it's just, it makes it a lot easier.
Where my Mario Teaches Typing fans at?
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, we should talk about that. But before we do, I did want to comment too that, all those learning styles you mentioned, they all could be activated by a video game. There's sound and visuals and writing or reading rather. And there's a kinesthetic element to playing video games. And I think that's why it can be a very powerful tool. And then you think about something like VR, even more so. But
yeah, and we'll get to this. We'll get to this a little bit later with gamification. But then on top of that, it's the constant rewarding and like dopamine rush that you get when you're like when you achieve something in a game. Like that's kind of what gamification is, right? It's like and it's stuff that you see in mobile games as well, where it's like, oh, you get like a badge for today because you signed in and blah blah blah. It's like your brain gets a little blip whenever you get a little reward in a game, so it kind of encourages people to learn as well.
Absolutely.
And then you hinted at this, David, but Nintendo has done some Mario games that were educational video games. There was Mario's Missing, Mario's Time Machine, Mario's Early Years, which and then like you said, the Mario Teaches Typing games.
Yeah, Mario Teaches Typing was for PC because you had
a lot of these games were.
But I mean, also like Mario's Time Machine and Mario's Missing were on the Super Nintendo as well. I had Mario's Time Machine and I hated it as a kid because I was like, Mario's Time Machine, this sounds dope. I'm going to run around with dinosaurs and shit. And then it was just like factoids about like ancient Rome and shit like that.
Yeah, it's weird. I think like all of these games were actually on PC as well, or like on DOS and stuff like that. And Nintendo hasn't really done that with many other games, but
yeah, I guess it was for classroom purposes. When they already have,
that totally makes sense for that reason. And then now we've got stuff like, I mean, not just now, but you know, in Nintendo's history, there's been games like the Brain Age, the brain training games, and I guess those qualify as sort of educational games. It's not quite the same.
You could say that. However, there have been studies that show that Brain Age does nothing for your brain.
Right.
Isn't it more like going for a jog, kind of just a little mental jog? Like you know, you could use it to wake yourself up in the morning instead of staring at your phone, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I think the verbiage that they had on like your brain's age and like all that kind of stuff was essentially made up. But I mean, it can't hurt for sure. You know?
Which I think is why maybe they've never put it out in the US because of that issue. Like the one for Switch, like that's still never, has that ever come out?
Yeah. It's not released. It released in Europe and Japan, but not here.
Yeah. That's weird.
Such a
Very
disappointment.
strange.
Yes.
And then, you know, we have to talk about this too. Like there's games that aren't maybe meant to be educational, but have a strong component. And I think of things like music games or like creative games like Mario Paint.
Labo.
Labo is the current Switch era one. But like things like Mario Maker or Minecraft is a big one. Like those have a learning element to them.
Dreams, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Dreams
anything
for
where
sure.
you make something or it's like playing with blocks or there's a, you know, like learning engineering a little bit or how things go together and that kind of
right. And I think more than anything, it's like, I mean, this isn't like what you would call edutainment. That's like a phrase that we talked about during the break, but like, but this is more like stuff that's going to like start firing up parts of kids' brains to increase their creativity and just kind of get them used to working with their hands. Like maybe if they are kinesthetic learners, like this would be something that
especially,
would really help along the path in that way.
I mean, David, to that point, it's like if we're trying to draw a line to figure out what is like an edutainment product versus like a game with creative or education elements, like that's like Mario Paint. Like it's not going to teach you the history of painting or how to draw the human form, but it might encourage you to learn how to paint better or learn to write music to kind of kick off and, as you said, you know, fire the synapses in your brain.
Yeah. Did you guys ever discover anything that you really fell in love with in life and you discovered it through gaming on accident, through a completely different experience? Did that ever happen?
I mean, that's a big question. Do you have an example?
Sorry. There's a certain discovery aspect to video games. For me, you know, one of the things that I do, I'm a director of photography and I work in like commercial and television. So one of the things I do is fly drones, and Halo for me, having the Crucible mode, the camera where you could just fly the camera around wherever you wanted. That's basically how I learned to fly drones before I, you know, was actually using aerial video systems. So,
I mean, a lot of the drones are basically using Xbox controllers to move them.
Exactly.
I mean?
Is there anything that you guys ever like, you know, did you ever have that kind of eureka moment with a video game?
I don't think this is quite what you're talking about, but I do feel like playing video games prepared me for driving a little bit better. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
there's things like that.
Yeah.
And like you're talking about flying a drone or using computers and all that. You know what I mean? Like it inspired me to really want to play around on a computer with being young and loving all my computer games. Like I would just sit in front of the computer and mess around, which got me more familiar with it. Did you have something you were going to say, Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to date myself, but I used to play Duke Nukem 3D online with my friends, and we got really bored with maps. And so some friends and I, like through several months, learned how to make levels using the build engine. Duke Nukem is built on build. And so you could use, I learned how to make maps using a 2D like top-down bird's eye view, and how to take that 2D view and how it translates to 3D. Because I was bored playing the same maps over and over, and wanted to make something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess my example would be, and I'm sure there are better examples for this, but this is the first thing that kind of pops into my mind, is like when I was playing Pokemon Blue for the Game Boy.
Ooh, here we go.
I had a Game Shark, and I would use the Game Shark to just like unlock Pokemon, right? And just like spawn anybody I wanted, or like break into the game and basically, but then learning about how you enter like hex code or whatever, like into the Game Shark in order to like unlock these things, like really, it like kind of blew my mind. I like didn't understand how like a string of numbers could basically like manipulate the game's code into doing whatever I wanted just from a seemingly little bit of information. So that got me more interested into just like cracking things open, you know what I mean? And like troubleshooting and knowing that like any kind of like software or hardware is not necessarily a closed off system and is not insurmountable. And I mean, to this day, I mean, I'm a big troubleshooter. You know, if I have a problem, like a technical issue with a computer or anything like that, like I can't sleep until I figure out how to fix it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that has informed, you know, how I perform in my job, you know, as like I work as an editor right now professionally, you know, I've directed movies myself. And it's like, I think having that kind of troubleshooting mindset and wanting to get down to the root of the problem and crack it open and figure out how everything works definitely has stuck with me to this day. And I probably owe that to Game Shark.
That's great. I love that.
Well, I think there's a lot to that discovery aspect that gaming can offer. And David, you were starting to talk about the word gamification a little bit. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, I mean, gamification is like it's like an like edu term. I don't think it's actually in the dictionary. It's not like a real word, but the idea of gamification is just like essentially tricking people into learning. You know what I mean? It's like you have an end goal in mind on like the points that you need to get across with a certain kind of software, a certain kind of curriculum. And when you gamify that, you basically are rewarding people for learning and encouraging them to continue to learn without them overtly realizing it necessarily. I mean, it's not like people are stupid and they don't realize that badges, you know, are just a tactic, but it's like, it's like that. It's like I was talking about with Breath of the Wild with the carrot dangling. It's just like a little bit of like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an incentive to continue learning. And it's used,
right.
It's used throughout education, but it's also used in everything.
Days.
Like gamification has totally invaded our lives.
And I think maybe we can circle back to that because there are some broader points about video games I want to make.
Yeah, sure.
That tie in. No, you're fine with gamification.
You're off the podcast
because it is so much more than just education. But I did want to talk about the iPad, just and how that revolutionized educational software and video games for learning. Because you think about like all the stuff we were talking about, like Oregon Trail or Mario Paint or any of that stuff. There's a lower age limit there, but when you have an iPad, a fucking 2-year-old can learn to open an iPad and play a game that just requires touchscreen. That the floodgates have opened for educational video games and educational software with the advent of how many people have touchscreen devices now.
I've seen a video on YouTube of an iguana playing Fruit Ninja. like iPads are about as simple as you can get, right? It's just like put your hand on the thing that you see, right?
And one of the reasons I think that this topic is really interesting right now, and I maybe should have said this sooner, is that people like myself who are parents of relatively young children are stuck at home. A lot of us are, and trying to juggle keeping some modicum of education going with your child, but also having to work a job. And one of the things that bridges that gap is being able to say, play this educational iPad game for the next 30 minutes while I send these emails off or something. And you don't maybe feel as bad about putting them in front of, something else. And there's a glut of this stuff, and it's hard to wade
What are
through.
some of the games that you give to Magnus to play?
we've been trying to work on reading because he's you know, at an age where that's something he can do. And there's some game that my wife's the one that like finds all these softwares. It's something like Eggman or something like that. The reading one that he's been doing a lot of. I'm trying Reading Eggs. There it is. Reading Eggs. I had to look it up real quick. It's actually pretty good. You know, talking about this gamification stuff. Like, it's funny what motivates people. Like, he's also very gamer. Like, I hope he doesn't listen to this later and feel bad, but like my son can't catch a ball, but he can play a video game on the Switch. And that's my fault. 100%. But like,
there, you've indicated yourself. It's okay.
But like, watching him play this Reading Eggs game, he'll be like, look, Dad, I'm on world 10, you know? And like that motivates him a little bit to like, to do the exercises on it.
And you know, kids in like K-12,
awesome.
like that's the deep well where a lot of these like software companies are trying to market their stuff, right? Like, I mean, even all the way back to like, you know, we were talking about the book Console Wars. Like they were talking in that about like how Sega was trying to make their own educational system, and they did for a while. I forget what it was called. It's the Pico, right?
Yeah, Pico.
The Pico.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that.
But like, it's not just for kids. Like this works on adults as well. Like,
oh yeah.
And in fact, like that's the majority of people that we would be working with when I worked at that e-learning company was stuff for adults and people in college. And it's like, you know, I mean, think about something like Duolingo.
Yeah,
right?
that's totally the great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and to a lesser extent, I would say Rosetta Stone, but like Duolingo has like nailed the like, it's like, oh, I want to do just one more thing. You know what I mean? It like has you on the hook. And then, you know, I've learned language decently well. It was like Duolingo was basically my refresher for Spanish, you know, after having taken it as a child. It was like really helpful for me to like learn certain phrases and stuff like that. So it definitely works across the spectrum.
Yeah. And just like a breaking down, like this is a revolution because the old model was effective, but it wasn't as effective as we want, like the learning model. So we would have these, you know, the really long lecture, and then you would take an exam. And the exam would determine how well you did or how much you learned. But like if we can't remember everything that we hear in a lecture, so we kind of space out the practice. You learn something and then you get to practice it. You learn something and you get to practice it. Then you learn something and then maybe you combine all of those things that you learned so you can so it cements that learning more.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And like Duolingo does that well, where you start to learn words and then you put those words together and learn phrases on top of everything is gamified.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like leveling up in an RPG, right? It's like, yeah.
I mean, just like this model of like test taking, like this is huge. Like we can all like have a pop quiz to learn vocabulary words. But if you put that in a game format, say you put a vocabulary quiz in a Jeopardy format, or like a competition of split the group into two teams and whoever raises their hand first, you are gamifying what is an existing format by encouraging collaboration, encouraging people to learn, but also, you know, you're tricking people to have fun and learn at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you know, we were talking about gameplay. We're talking about gameplay loops, or maybe sometimes dark loops and things like that. But when you have groups of players working together as a group to achieve a common goal, you know, an example might be, did you guys ever play World of Warcraft? That's something that really engages a group of people to work together for a commonality. And if you can kind of get that level of excitement and interest and stick-to-itiveness, and, you know, even if it's just strangers in an ad hoc setting, or whether they're not, you know, maybe they're part of a clan, maybe they just met. But that, if you can harness that kind of interest level and apply it to something like learning language or learning anything, I think there's a tremendous power that the gamification of e-learning, it can be tremendous. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally.
And to that point, you're not only learning the game mechanics or learning about history, but you're learning how to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
You're learning how to work together as a team for a shared common goal.
So maybe we could talk about the difference a little bit between gamification and simulation, because there are a lot of great ways to learn through simulation, I think.
What would be the main differences that you would say?
So, for instance, when we like David, I know your father's a pilot. You know, you probably grew up playing flight sims and things like that. Well, what's the difference between a flight sim and something like Pilot Wings?
Well, technically, I mean, like, so my dad like runs the simulator at work. Like, my dad is an educator. Like, he's a check airman.
Oh, cool.
Is what his job is. So he trains the pilots using the big moving simulator and stuff like that. So at least as far as professionally goes, it's the fucking setup, right? It's money. It's the main difference.
And realism.
There's that. There's absolutely.
But yeah, but other than that, it's like realism, right? And it's detail, right? That's going to be the main difference. But essentially, it's the same concepts.
I tend to maybe disagree with you a little bit, because if we're talking about simulation, we're trying to just replicate a real life experience. Like Need for Speed is a great, driving sim. Maybe it helped us learn to drive a little bit growing up. Who knows? But something like Pilot Wings, it's like that's a game system designed with very specific objectives for players to achieve that have really no relation other than the theme of flying to the real experience of flying or parachuting or anything like that.
Sure.
So I think there's opportunities where gamification can be something that can be more captivating than simulation, because it can be a little bit more palatable to an audience. And so when we're talking about, students or discovering things for the first time, we can use systems of gamification to our advantage, not to stray too far away from simulation and keeping it real. But if you can gamify something, then you're keeping the interest level. You're hopefully keeping that excitement level about the entire experience, and that's the experience of learning as well as play.
For sure. That totally makes a ton of sense.
One thing, too, I just wanted to make sure we talked about was just and we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but just the general value of learning through playing any video game. And I don't want to oversell this, because I know we do a gaming podcast and I love video games, and there's probably some fair criticisms of this, but I think that just playing any video game growing up helps somebody with some elements of, I know you hear a lot of anecdotal stories about reading. Like I learned to read playing Pokemon, and I mean, I'm kind of seeing this a little bit with my kid. I'm trying to teach him to read, and we're playing a lot of Animal Crossing, and there's a lot of text.
Animal Crossing. There's so much dialoge in that game.
There's so much dialogue.
And it's funny to watch my son play this game, because he has very good visual memorization of where, which, if I need to put something in storage, it's the bottom one on my options. But when he doesn't know, he'll ask me, and I'll be like, well, these are the things they say. Which one starts with P, or whatever, to try and encourage him to not just memorize patterns, but to learn the words a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I know that's something you hear a lot of kids learning. I know that I learned typing because I played a lot of computer games. Like I started to learn in typing class the best way to type. And when I came back after Christmas break, the typing teacher was like, you don't need this. Go over to my computer and play on my computer. It's because I was awesome at it, because I'd learned what I need, the right way to do it. And then I just played DOS games all the time or whatever.
I mean, they say the best way to learn a language is to just watch TV and play video games in that language, right? Just immerse yourself in it, and eventually you'll figure it out,
Yeah. So there's that. And then there's also hand-eye coordination. I think there's something to that. Sort of critical thinking, puzzle solving skills. You added some things here, AVK, that I think are great. If you want to go over any of those, you said advanced vocabulary. I think that you made that point earlier about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I always just enjoyed, Pokemon, around that age level of playing through RPGs and learning new words. That was just always such an adventure. I think phonics and all of that can be really, especially with gamification in mind, something that we need to be focusing on with the future of education, especially like it is right now with this unfortunate kind of situation with COVID. So,
and you have life skills on this list. I think that's really great. I think video games can teach you about decision making. Maybe you don't want to throw a 5-year-old in front of Skyrim or something, but a game where
sure.
I was playing Cities Skyline with my kid, and it's well, if we don't put water to these houses, these people are gonna move out or whatever. You know what I mean?
Or die.
Yeah. Totally. And I even something as simple as like, though it might be a virtual form of this, but teaching object permanence, like, you place something, even in Animal Crossing, you place something on the ground, it's going to be there. Like,
and you can't put something on top of it or once it's there, like my kid will try to do, and it's like, no, you've already got something there.
In the third dimension, like spatial awareness too, like you were talking about, like making maps, Matt. Like I think that's a big thing. I mean, especially when with kids that might go on to be architects or something like that, like having that like early exposure to it could definitely jumpstart that part of the brain.
Absolutely. And so that's why, like, especially Tim Rogers makes a great point about how Pokemon teaches children the value of diversity at an early age. So if we can, especially infuse messages like that into curriculum, while kids are having a blast, then that seems like a win-win-win.
Yeah, totally.
You have budgeting on here, which I think is a good one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what a mortgage was when I was, playing Animal Crossing the first time, but that would have been helpful to know going into that experience.
Yeah.
If only you had to pay your taxes in Animal Crossing, maybe I'd know how to do my fucking taxes.
My man.
Well, I think that's funny that you talk about budgeting, because maybe that can lead us to sort of some of the bigger picture stuff here, which is that I'm not like an educator, like we all said, but I think there's a lot of problems with education. Like, I think education is kind of stuck in the past, and that's because of regulation and because of the way it was designed initially. And I think that, like what you were talking about, Matt, with like changing some of those old ingrained patterns, that we have all this new technology, iPads, streaming, and video games, that like we could really change the way education is done using all these tools. And I think kind of when we were talking about gamification in video games, there's a lot there to unpack that probably we don't have time to get into all the options. But does anybody have any thoughts on anything big like that, or does that?
Well, I would just say that I think you're right in that stuff has needed to change for a while and is in the process of changing, and is only going to be further accelerated by the situation that we're in now. You've got kids who are remote learning, who are calling in for Zoom lessons, which probably don't hold their attention. You know what I mean? Like in this time, like God willing, we'll be out of this in, a month, but probably not. And it's like, we're going to have to figure out fast, like ways to keep kids engaged. And I think that, we've already laid out, a bunch, because we're all educators, as we've said, we've already laid out that like gamification works. Right. And it's like, and having that kind of hands-on, like interactive sort of, curriculum, like is very helpful. So hopefully we see this stuff starting to become the norm very soon.
I think you're right, David. And it seems like, we have the resource of time on our hands, time with our children at home. And we also have the luxury of, a lot of great, there's a company, techwillsaveus.com. You were speaking a little bit about learning kind of coding at an early age. So there's a bunch of great resources that can be infused into curriculums that are already out there. And there's only going to be more that we see, emerging. Just a quick callback to the Pokemon episode that you guys did. That was a great episode. But you guys talked about that list of the most successful multimedia entertainment IPs. And it surprised the heck out of me that Pokemon was on the very top of that list, above, Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, Barbie, everyone else. But that also kind of illuminated a really interesting point to me that, wow, it seems like video games, we have their attention. Like, we have all this time now. So let's put the two together and really change the future of education. And
to that point too, I think what video games can do, and I think this is why we've talked about doing a cosplay episode, and why I think video games and cosplay is stronger for video games, is because of that identification that you have when you play a video game with the material, that maybe it's like you're one step more connected than watching a movie or reading a book, right? Like, because you're controlling
it's agency.
You have agency.
Yes,
and I think that can create a connection to material that doesn't exist in other formats. And then, we talked about this, like you throw in VR or something, and that, we talked about in previous episodes about studies show that, VR. And I mean, video games to a certain extent are better than, pen and paper for learning things, but like VR is so much better than, it allows you to actually experience something kind of like your dad in the flight sim, right? Like, that those experiences are a lot closer to reality and let you learn better.
I think for him, it's half that and half just the fun of throwing in engine failures and lightning storms and shit like that.
Nice.
Just some good natured dad chaos right there.
Yeah. We'll have my dad on the podcast sometime to talk about flight sims.
That would be so wonderful, David.
Go ahead.
Just like, if we want to rethink like education, we're going to solve it on this Nintendo podcast for sure. I'm ready to do that right now. But like, I just remember growing up anecdotally and just like we're ingesting all of these ideas and these facts. But we're all trying to learn something. And the biggest thing that I always think about is, in my industry, we call it the WIFM. What's in it for me? Like, you're telling me something, you're teaching me something, but I don't know why I need to learn this. And I don't know why I should know this thing. That could be anything from learning how to make eggs to learning how to balance a budget. And just really, really drive it home, you have to give your audience the reason why. Like Carmen Sandiego is really good, for multiple reasons, but you get to learn about the world, and you get to learn about the world that opens your experience to learn about different people and different cultures and traveling and industries and all of that different stuff.
And I mean, look at Cooking Mama. You can learn cooking and cryptocurrency at the same time.
Oh. Well, I like all of our big topics. There's so much we could talk about, but I think we should probably wrap it up. But does anybody want to share anything we didn't get to talk about, or anything else? Any final thoughts on video games and education? I think you guys did a very thorough job. It was a great conversation. I guess there was one final thought I had, more of a question, and this can be rhetorical. If you guys want to talk about it for a little bit, that's great. But even listeners at home, just think about it. If you're a gamer, what is something that you learned playing video games? Just think about that. And, go ahead and maybe give the guys a comment on the Facebook page, or drop it in the Discord. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All that.
Oh yeah, dude! Fucking AVK with the call to action, baby. That's what I'm talking about.
Tell us what you learned.
Yeah.
Tell us,
please. What have you learned from this podcast? AVK has already started. He said he learned that Pokemon was the top IP. No, but it's true. It's true. There is so much stuff that if you take a second and you think about and you try to source where you learned stuff in the past, it can kind of be mind blowing, right? It's like not only just from video games, but I learned so many words from Scar's song in The Lion King. You know what I mean? Like quid pro quo. I learned that word. You know what I mean? It's like whenever you start to really break down knowledge and where you started to gather things from your life, you'll be surprised how much of it is just the entertainment that you intake, right? It doesn't have to be educational in nature. It's like you can learn just from having experiences in your life. And I don't think that digital experiences are any less than real life experiences when it comes to learning. Yeah. Or really that different from reading a book, right? Like you're engaging with some sort of material.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Well said, gents. Well said.
Good talk. Yeah.
I guess that wraps up the topic. Yeah.
We'll take a break and then we'll talk about all the video games that we've been playing and learning from recently. So now is the part of the show where we talk about the video games we have been playing recently. Does anybody feel like going first? Anybody real excited to share?
I don't necessarily want to go first, but I do want to say I just turned on my Switch and Animal Crossing was on, and then I immediately saw Matthew is online.
I am? Me?
I already started, so I'll go first. Been playing just so much Animal Crossing. Most of the times that I try to start another game, I end up just playing Animal Crossing. Had a great time trying to figure out the stock market with you guys. We talked last time about how a bunch of people came over to my island whenever I had high prices for turnips. Matt, you made a great resource in the Discord. Basically, Matt has been like collecting data on everybody's turnip prices and been making a really good time to like make a bunch of money from this like digital trade of collected goods. And so that's just been really fun and exciting within the community. And I will say in Animal Crossing, I finally got my bedroom where I want it to be. I've got a great basement with a giant Switch Headz mural on it. And I've got a great bathroom. So I'm feeling pretty good about my house at this point. That's what I'll say about Animal Crossing. In addition to that, I did pick up on Friday Final Fantasy VII Remake. And I haven't been able to play it as much as I wanted because, I was hanging out with Sasha a lot over the weekend and kind of just didn't get around to it. But I did put quite a bit of hours in last night and a little bit today after work. And I'm really, really liking this game. Has anyone else played Final Fantasy VII Remake yet, or is it just me?
Mine came in a day early. I got it Sunday.
Okay.
But it's still sitting in the packaging.
Yeah, that's fair. You got to get around to it before next week so we can talk more in detail about it. And I'm about 4 or 5 hours into the game right now, so I'll definitely have a lot more to say about the game next week. But man, the game is absolutely gorgeous. It's someone that has played Final Fantasy VII and more specifically the Midgar portion, like probably 5 or 6 times, honestly, because I start that game so many times and never finish it. It's just like crazy seeing how everything matches up exactly to what you remember as a kid, right? And like, I don't know, it's just a huge achievement. There's weird things about it, like all the main characters look incredible, but then like a lot of the NPCs like look pretty weird in comparison. So when people look like amazing and then the other models don't look that great, that's a little off-putting. Also, like, I'm not a fan of the motion capture in this game. Like, the characters are like very large and like overtly like J-pop with their like body movements. Basically, like Tifa like has a lot of lines that are like really down to earth and about like trauma and like past experiences, but then she's moving around like an anime character and it just like doesn't really fit for me. Maybe if I was playing the game in Japanese and not in English, it would like fit a little bit more in my head. But I'm nitpicking at this point. I'm really enjoying the game. I think the world is beautiful and I think the combat is incredible. So I'm really enjoying it. I can't wait to talk about it with you guys next week if you guys get around to playing it. And then other than that, since I had my PS4 on, I've been playing a little bit of Spelunky too. And I actually was playing Spelunky right before we recorded this, and I'm going to go back to it right after we finish.
I also have been playing some Animal Crossing. For some reason, I thought that I wasn't going to get the fishing tournament because I never saw the bulletin board notification, but I am now convinced that my son must have just deleted it from the bulletin board, which is not impossible because he likes to go on there and draw things.
Yeah.
But I've been playing some Animal Crossing. I've been playing some Smash Brothers. Nothing new this week, but just more kunai. I meant to say this last week when we were talking about Mario. There's a nice little Mario nod in kunai. I feel like there's a auto scroll, what's the word I'm looking for? Like airship moment.
Yeah,
but I was like, it feels like they've got to be pulling that from Mario.
Yeah, it's like similar to Bowser's flying ship.
Yes, exactly. And then I've been playing more Guildlings on Apple Arcade, and I feel like I can finally talk about that game a little bit more.
Please do.
So Guildlings is interesting. It's a little rough around the edges. I think it's supposed to be a pretty short game, but it's like an RPG where you play. It's got some really interesting ideas going for it. The battle mechanic, which isn't really a battle, is like you're trying to keep your character's moods up, and you get a lot of dialogue choices that actually matter, and how you level up your characters is by interacting with them and making choices that please them. At first it kind of seemed like, well, I can never really be negative, but there are times when it does kind of make sense to say things that in different ways that are, it's not just about like placating the characters. It's really interesting. And I'll talk more about it as I keep going, but,
awesome.
And then I do have to mention that My son has kind of taken over my Switch. Being stuck at home, one of the things that he's really, I bought a family plan so that he could go to visit other islands on Animal Crossing. And then he decided to start playing Lego City Undercover under his profile from the beginning by himself. And he's playing the game by himself. And this is why I'm trying to buy a second Switch. And I have multiple Switch Lite orders out there trying to see if they will actually go through. Because I'm like, when he's sitting there doing that on Saturday for a big chunk of time, I'm like, dang, I want to just be playing too. So, that's what I've been playing.
It explains why you're playing so many games on Apple Arcade. Matt, what have you been playing, man?
I've been playing nothing but Animal Crossing. I unlocked terraforming.
Oh, you got a 3-star island then.
I got a 3-star island.
Really
KK Slider came to my island. No big deal. The KK Slider. And I've just been, that's unlocked a completely different way to, I'm like rebuilding my whole island.
That's awesome.
So I made my museum on a second level, and I got waterfalls all over it.
It's amazing.
It's really extra, but it's so much fun.
I got to come visit, man. That sounds amazing.
Dude, I'm working on an outdoor museum with nothing but waterfalls around it.
I gotta come visit, bro.
I'm upset. Sorry, go ahead, APK.
Oh, you had me at Waterfalls, baby. That's all I said. That's all I said.
Dude, come hang out at my Waterfalls, baby. That's right. I was upset that I didn't know terraforming or like making waterfalls was this easy, because I wish I would have named my island Waterworld.
Ooh. Have any of you guys seen the video of any of the players who have gone and just flooded their entire island?
Yeah, I have.
That seems like a great way to waste 70 hours of your life.
That's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah, as far as I understand, terraforming is not like a swift process.
No. I built this world and I must destroy it. Yeah, Animal Crossing and then Half-Life Alyx. There's other than to say is everyone needs to experience Half-Life Alyx. It is, I said it in the past few episodes, it is both a video game experience, a movie, and a theme park ride.
About how far are you in the game?
I think I'm on either the last chapter or the second to last chapter.
Cool.
The penultimate chapter.
Very good.
Because some crazy stuff has happened, and some characters from previous games, learning about them since it's a prequel.
Yeah, does it like add to the lore quite a bit?
Yeah, it does quite a bit. It really
awesome.
sinks in. And Valve has done such a good job of really having a good story and good game mechanics, such as they will introduce like a new weapon or like a hidden item that behind a gate that you can't get to, that you're really close to and you can see, but then the world loops you back to the area later. So
That's
it
awesome.
really does a really good job of like teasing you of there's a reward coming, but really extends out that time that you really want to play to get that thing.
Cool. Can't wait to
Fuck,
try it
it's
out.
such a good game. It's insane of how good it is.
Yeah.
Also, I let Casey try to play it for like 5 minutes, and she put it on, and I was in a safe room, and there's like eerie music, and there's dead bodies everywhere, and she's like, I can't do this. I'm out of here.
That's gamification.
Yeah.
Oh,
I learned how to end a relationship.
AVK, what have you been playing, man?
Oh man. Okay, so I'm a little bit late to the island party, but I finally started my adventure in Animal Crossing New Horizons over the weekend. So that's been a blast. I went from 0 to becoming like a full-blown time-traveling fishmonger in just a matter of days. So that's been exhilarating. Let's see. I've also, I jump on and play a couple of rounds of Smash with or Splatoon with a couple of friends. I'm actually a game that's on Switch that I'm playing, the Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2 HD remaster. David, instead of the Final Fantasy 7. I'm keeping it on the platform here on the show, especially.
I've been playing games on PlayStation. I'm a dirty PlayStation head.
I've also been doing a little bit of streaming of that really great game by David Weiss that you guys turned me on to, Everything. And I do this kind of weird thing on my Twitch channel. It's called Doper Winfrey. If anybody wants to check this out, I call it lo-fi luxury consciousness streaming, and I just have everything set up, and I run it through a video synthesizer program on my computer. And then I have some custom playlists or audio mixes that I kind of curate as well. I also bring in Alan Watts quotes and the 24/7 Alan Watts YouTube channel. Sorry if that's your channel. I love you, but I totally pirate that into my stream.
I think Alan would be okay with it.
So, I hope so. So yeah, that's what I've been up to this quarantine, boys.
That's
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah. Every time I've tried to check out one of the streams that you've done, like they've always ended like right as I'm getting there. So I gotta catch one from the beginning sometime because those look like a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks, man. I have a lot of fun with them. The game plays itself, and the music, you never know what to expect. But yeah, I like to dig into the Zen moments that game offers.
Yeah. Hell yeah. That's great.
Very cool. I think that does it then. Thanks, Alex von Kurkendall. Thanks for being on the show, AVK.
AVK himself was here.
Yeah,
Thanks for
dude.
joining us, dude.
Such a joy, fellas. Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah.
So glad to finally have you on. I had a great time with you, man. That was great. We got to have you on again sometime.
Also, I'm upset that it took me an hour and a half to realize that you have a giant goddamn tiger painting behind your head.
Joe Exotic here on the podcast.
It's actually a leopard, I believe, and I'm wearing.
It's a leopard.
Yeah,
I'm wearing.
your shirt or your jacket.
I have
It's
leopard. Shout out corduroy. I'm wearing a leopard corduroy print jacket.
Hey, there you go.
Also shout out other Switch head Courtney Corcoran for. She actually found this for a television show we were working on last year, and I ended up sourcing it from the wardrobe department. So yeah, you know.
Very good. Very good. I take it back. You're Carol Baskin. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Thanks to AVK. Thanks to AVK's Corduroy. Thanks to Corduroy for doing our music.
Corduroy.
Sorry to Chris McKeever. We didn't play Disney Tsum Tsum Festival.
So sorry.
We ran out of time.
Oh, if you want to find me online, I am PDYX.
If you want to find me online, I'm Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And where can the people find you, AVK?
You can find me on your friends list and on Discord as VapeWolf69. On Instagram, I am known as @DigitalExist.
Very good. You got some good content on that Instagram. I recommend our listeners give you a follow. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for episode 61 of Super Switch Headz. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you learned something from us talking about education in very layman's terms. But I think that, there's a lot that we can all learn from video games and from this entire industry at whole. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. If you want to find our podcast on social media, we are at Super Switch Headz on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Switch Headz on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, we love you so much. We're going to have a great episode for you next week, so make sure you tune in. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.